to the second part of our interview with Gráinne, Vice Chair of the Eurelectric Working Group on Regulation and Customers, who brings more than 3 decades of experience across networks in the electricity sector. In this part, we will explore enabling technologies, current risks, and actionable recommendation for system operators and policymakers. Gráinne, welcome back.
Thank you.
Okay, we can proceed with the next question. How critical are smart metering, advanced data management, and cybersecurity for reliable flexibility mechanisms, and where do you see the biggest risks today?
Okay. I think all of them are actually, they're not just enablers, they're very foundational as well. So, for example, if you have smart metering can unlock the flexibility as it provides, a clear evidence base of what's happened. And when you think about flexibility products, I guess one of the important things is that the granularity of the product matches the granularity of what you're metering. I think that's important. I think in terms as well of metering, smart metering is kind of the link when we have all the DMDs as well. And when they come in and when they form part of the flexibility market, the record with the smart meter, I think, will be extremely important. When we look at data management, again, we're moving from a situation where we didn't really need to have a whole pile of visibility on the, say, for example, on the LV network. There was a lot of things that we didn't really need to know, and we didn't really need to have the same granularity. Whereas now, moving forward, if we're trying to enable any of the flexibility products, what we're looking at is the visibility of the networks, the real time or almost real time of what's actually happening on the network. What's the smart meter data? What are operations doing? What are they planning on doing? Can we have systems that will integrate all of that? The management of the outage management systems, the control systems, the data systems. And again, we need to have that integration, because if we don't have that, we can't see what the flexibility is we're getting. We can't validate it. And in some ways, if we want to get down and maximize the use while reducing the risk, the better granularity we have on the data and the better integration of it, the better it actually is. So again, just to mention the TSO DSO operating model, which we're doing. Without that operating model, because our TSO operates down to 1 megawatt, without that operating model, which is a new system that we have to look at, we would not be able to operate optimally any flexibility service providers that are coming into the market. We would have to take a far more conservative approach than what's actually needed. So I think all those new systems are really, really important. And then if we look at cyber as well, so for anybody who wants to participate to a certain extent in our markets, they have to match our cyber protocols. And again, when we look at the world today and the increasing amount of cyber attacks on all our systems, the cyber security element is just becoming more and more important. Because if you look like, well, what are the risks? The risk will be sort of compromised control or data signals. The risk would be data breaches. So, for example, say that the validation or the settlement data was affected. And then, of course, we have the customer trust. The customer trust and how we're managing our data. And I think it's really important that we keep that trust. At the moment in Ireland, as I said, we have about 2.6 million customers. We would like to see all of them having smart meters, but we have a refusal rate of perhaps about 5%, which is unfortunate. But we would like to see that going down even more, because without that, it's very hard to see how we would unlock all the flexibility that's actually required. So I suppose if we're looking at, the biggest risk today, if we look at it, there's a systems risk that we won't have the systems in place to actually manage it. And again, we'll be suboptimal. We also have mismatches between our flexibility, just say ambitions, and the meter and reality, those two have to be lined up. And I suppose when you look at it, it's really about integrating all the systems in the market in a way that works both for us as the DSO, it works for the TSO, and it works for the flexibility services provider, in the sense that it provides safety, it provides security, it provides trust without without being overly complex or providing too many onerous requirements on our flexibility service providers.
Yeah. Okay. And we mentioned smart metering, and it is very difficult to have any flexibility uh, without smart metering. We can say maybe that smart meters are some foundation. And we mentioned tariffs and also some energy management behind the meter. And do you have in your company, do you use smart meters for communication with the customers? Do customers have any devices in the home connected with the meter and have some messages from utility from your company? Do you have experience with that?
I would say that's probably a little bit mixed in the sense that the home information coming from the smart meter that is yet to be rolled out. But many customers are actually very aware of their usage through two different methods. One is effectively through third parties, those who have solar, EV, or e-heat. Tend to have apps and devices that allow them to monitor and control what their equipment is doing. So they have up to the minute information. And what we have done as a company is we've established a portal where it is 24 hours in delay, but customers can see their 48 reads. So every half an hour, one day behind. And it actually, without any publicity effectively at all, very low key launch, we had over 100,000 people sign up almost straight away. And when you go into this portal, you have a lot of insights. And we put down a number of insights, a lot of graphs, so people can see how they're using their electricity, not quite in real time. And yet, I suppose I have to put in the plug for my own company, in that the portal has won a number of awards in terms for communication and ease of access, and it has been acknowledged as a really useful and simple tool that helps customers with their to manage their behaviours. And as well as that, there's some functionality in there that customers can download their readings, and they can give that to a third party, effectively like a broker, who will find the best electricity tariff for them and the best supplier as well. So, I think that's kind of very interesting. What we're trying to do is we're trying to put customers at the center, and we're trying to allow them to use their electricity in the way that they want to use it, and that's best for them.
Yeah.
And helping them
Okay.
on their net zero journey.
Some web portals also advise customers how to change consumption profile in intention to decrease the price of bill. So we can say that it is also one flexibility mechanism.
Well, true. And as well as that, the previous in our previous segment where I mentioned Beat the Peak, that was for customers who had signed up. They would get texts and emails giving them little tips on how to change their consumption or how better to use it. So
okay, so you work with that. Okay, so our next question is if you were advising DCO or regulator in Europe today, what would be the first realistic and high impact step toward implementing market-based flexibility?
I think there's a number of different steps, and I think for regulators and for DSOs, I think the best is that we have to work together. So if you look at it, I suppose there's a whole range of things. The first is maybe to understand what flexibility is and what flexibility isn't, so as not to have unrealistic ideas about what flexibility can do. as we said before, it is a tool just to optimize the use of the network. It can reduce costs to the customers by using the network optimally. So if I was saying as a first step, I would say we've said there are 4 different types of flexibility. Try all of them, you know. Engage in, it's not just about the market, but it's about customer behavior and education. So while we want to try out different types of flexibility, market-based is important, but I think it's really important to also use the others as well at the same time. And I think start small. So I think you've got to start very small, simple, and to learn from it. And maybe the most important thing is by learning by doing. If you spend too long thinking about it, or how to develop the perfect model, or get the perfect data architecture, or the perfect platform, it's very hard. How would you develop that without actually trialing it and to see what's wanted? Now, I did mention behaviors in education, but it's also communication. Like, I don't think it's something a regulator can do by itself, or a DSO. The market participants need to be involved in the discussions. We need to see what they think is reasonable. So, for example, with our demand flexibility products, and with our Beat the Peak business products, with all of those, we spent an amount of time consulting. We spent over a number of years consulting with our customers to say, this is what we're thinking of doing. We consulted with the regulator. So I think that's really important. I think there's a phrase, is that, that's something like perfection is the enemy of actually achieving something. And I think that's probably really, really important here. And I think the other thing maybe for regulators to start the market is not to be too focused on the cost benefit analysis or the cost of market-based flexibility initially, remembering that the market has to be developed, players have to come into it, they have to understand what's going on, everybody has to get comfortable. And in lots of cases, that can only start by small pilots, perhaps in places that don't really need flexibility either, so more as a proof of concept. And then as both the participants and the DSO get more comfortable, that's something that can be expanded out until eventually that this is applied in a situation where potentially there could be real harm if it doesn't work. So I think that's probably the most important thing, is just to try things, and to try things small, and to talk to people.
So pilot projects are good for education, for getting the knowledge.
I think so, because certain pilots, certain pilots may achieve a lot. Other pilots, there may not be many participants. We tried previously looking for a supply partner to do energy sharing. But at that time, the market wasn't right and people didn't want to participate. So therefore, it was something we could postpone for a while. Same thing with the summer outages, whereas the actual demand down is a product that people seem to have more engaged with. And again, it's important, if we want people to partake in the market, it's important that it works for them as well as working for us.
Yeah. Okay. And our last question is, what is the most important lesson you learned throughout your career? So some advice for younger colleagues.
I would say to seize every opportunity and to not say no. There could be times when you might say, oh, I'm not too sure I want to particularly do that, but I think you have to go into every job with an open mind, and to see there will always be learnings from it. And I think that's probably particularly important now for our young people, because being in a DSO at the moment is in lots of ways the center of that whole decarbonisation. It's, if you want to make a real impact in terms of climate change, being in a DSO is one of the ways to do that. And it is true that there's a number of, very new things that we are doing in DSO. So for example, like the flexibility we've just been talking about. There's different ways of doing things, but I think it's important not to forget that the system is there, and that there are still some very traditional skills that are very, very valuable, and that it is important, if you're coming into the industry, to have a willingness to learn what's new and what's out there, but not to forget the core strength of our networks, which has been there with us for the last 100 years. and to be happy to work on both different areas, which are totally complementary.
So it is a good impression to work on decarbonization.
Absolutely. If you want to decarbonize, I think distribution networks are really a critical place, a place to be.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for joining us, Gronia, and for sharing your insights and practical experience. Your perspective on bringing regulation and network strategy is essential for unlocking the full potential of flexibility in Europe's energy transition.
Mhm.
This concludes our interview, and stay tuned for more episodes as we continue exploring innovation in the future of energy system across Europe and beyond.